The Flames have quite the logjam going on at left wing, but is there anything they can do to possibly move some talent in and up through the lineup?
You're Locked On Flames, your daily podcast on the Calgary Flames. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Locked On Flames. As always, I am your host, Jess Belmosto, and thank you so much for joining me. Today, I thought it would be a great day to unpack the logjam that the Flames have going on at left wing and kind of seeing what they can do to possibly clear it, get some fresh blood in the lineup, and, is it actually realistic to see this happen over the next few seasons? Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Flames wherever you get your podcasts, as well as YouTube. We are here for you Monday through Friday, 5 days a week, your team every day. And I thought that, this would be a good idea to take a look at because we know that there's a lot of overcrowding, I guess you could say, in the Flames lineup in general. And whether that means it's the defense or left wing, you have to look at it. And I think when you break it down like this, it makes it easier to visualize and kind of put more, it puts it into perspective a little bit easier. But the Flames currently have Jonathan Huberdeau locked up for the next 6 years, Joel Farabee for the next 5, Martin Pospisil, as well as Yegor, Sharangovich, who are all established left wingers. And then Connor Zary is also plays on the left wing, but is also used as a center. Same thing with Sharangovich. But I think the Flames really need to decide what they're going to do with Zary. They can't have him flip-flopping because I mentioned it before, but it does remind me of Sam Bennett in his time in Calgary, where he was quote unquote misused and they didn't give him an opportunity to establish himself at one position or the other, and basically just kind of, ran him right into Florida's arms. So, but with on paper, that is a lot of players, right? But you have to do something. You absolutely have to do something in order to integrate more scoring into this lineup. And I think we all know that Jonathan Huberdeau is not necessarily going to have a 115-point season ever again. And he may not have another season where he scores 30 or close to 30 goals again. Was last season a fluke? I don't want to believe so. I would love to see that is more consistent. That's he's settled in and he's going to have more consistent seasons like that, but I don't want to get my hopes up. But let's take a look at some players that are in line. And Yahoo News has this as their under 25 left wing power rankings. This was written by Wes Gilbertson. I don't necessarily agree or disagree with this power ranking system, but again, everyone has their own opinion. So Honzek is first on the list. He has a blend of size, strength, skill, and speed. He has all the ingredients to be a force of a power forward. He's working on cranking up the consistency in his game. Injuries have been an issue over the past few seasons as well. So durability is a concern. Personally, I think that Honzek just needs to add more weight. I think that, you aren't as fragile when you weigh 115 pounds soaking wet. But, I think that might be somewhere that Honzek can go. I know that there's a lot of talk about his time as a Flame in the Flames organization so far, and it hasn't been great, but I also don't want to write him off entirely. I think it's way too soon to do that. Adar Suniev This kid left home in Russia at like 14, 15 years old to come over to America to play North American hockey, which I think I can't imagine doing that as like 18, 19-year-old, but to do it as a full-fledged teenager, not knowing much English, not knowing anyone, good for him, honestly. And so the potential for him is to be a top six winger and have some time on the power play. He had a lot of time on the right wing during his time with the Minutemen, UMass Amherst, um, but he did play on the left side when he made his NHL debut. So I think that that is something, again, flexibility that you have going for you here. Jacob Battaglia. This is probably one of these next two guys I'm going to talk about are my biggest hopes. But Battaglia was one of the 2024 draft picks who was an absolute steal in the second round. He plays great in the below the hash marks and in the offensive zone. Just very sharp shooter, and he is still obviously working on his all-around game and polishing that up as well as strengthening his lower body. He is 19 years old, along with Andrew Basha, who is this other left winger that I'm very excited for. These two were second round picks last year, and with Basha, the emerging spark plug is speedy, smart, and tends to forget that he is slightly undersized, and that's not a bad thing. Basha has had great line mates in Medicine Hat, so he'll be determined to show he is a driver and not just a supporting piece. With his offensive numbers, people are worried about limiting him to an energy role. I don't want to see this kid just as a fourth liner. I don't. I think there could be a lot more to that. But between all of these players, I think that you can see the Flames clearing room for them at some point, as well as making sure they're taking advantage of the most recent draft picks. I think that that is going to be a huge thing that Conroy focuses on. But coming up next, we're going to talk more about clearing this logjam that the Flames have created for themselves and organizations find themselves in all the time. Have you ever looked at your bank account and wondered where on earth all of your money went? Yeah, I can't argue with that in the slightest because that's happened to me a time or two or 12. Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it is easy to lose track, and that's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it is a complete financial command center and that helps you track your accounts, all of your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. I don't like to acknowledge all the money that's going out, especially on frivolous things like door dashing myself lunch. It adds up. And Monarch Money allows me to see just where I could trim back some fat on my spending. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off of your first year. That is monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off of your first year. Thanks everyone for tuning into today's episode of Locked On Flames. As always, I am your host, Jess Belmosto, and make sure you're following along wherever you get your podcasts, as well as YouTube. Okay, so when you talk about clearing a logjam, there are several scenarios, right? Some players aren't, their contract is coming to an end, or, they'll be traded, or one player will be a different player is leaving, so they're going to move this player in the lineup. But with Sharangovich and Huberdeau both being under contract for the next 5 or 6 years, it's not necessarily as easy as just making a few adjustments. You're hoping that Sharangovich has a bounce back year. This season was tough for him after coming off of a 30-goal season, a career year, signing a 5-year contract extension that does not kick in until this summer. It wasn't a great look, and it just wasn't super what's the word I'm looking for? Super promising. It didn't give people a lot of confidence, and I can't say I blame them. And if let's say he has a bounce back year this year as well as next year, at the deadline, maybe a team comes calling for him. Or, maybe you start shopping him around yourself because you know that he has a 10-team no trade list. And maybe you know that there are some teams that could really use an extra hand there. And you make something work so you can call someone else up and do some more rearranging of your lineup. Maybe it's not even those 2 years. Maybe it's year 3 of this contract and someone needs a rental. I don't know. Like it is very difficult for me to see any sort of like promising future for Sharangovich after this season, as well as everything from that outlier of his 30-goal season. Like that was a complete outlying situation. So we'll have to see if he's able to bounce back. Obviously, it doesn't have to be that high offensively, but just something more than what we saw this season. You are never going to be trading Jonathan Huberdeau. You're not going to buy him out. And even with the cap rising, that contract is impossible to move. And maybe it is a situation where, towards the last year or 2 of his contract, maybe there's an expansion draft, for the 39th team in the NHL at that point. And, maybe Huberdeau says, yeah, he does what Gio does, basically. When Seattle happened. Yeah, like I'll waive my no movement clause, my no trade clause. That's fine. If you want to expose me in the draft, go ahead. And if I get selected, I get selected. Maybe that's a situation that happens. But I'm not betting on that. I can't guarantee that that's going to happen. And I do think that Huberdeau finishes his NHL career as a Flame one way or another. That's just my honest opinion, unless there is some ridiculous circumstance that no one has thought of yet. My only thought is that expansion draft towards, the 40th team at that point. Like that's honestly what it's going to feel like, because I know obviously there's talks of expanding to, Atlanta or Houston. Okay, so at that point, let's say that's 33, 34, 35 maybe. I don't know. I just, that's a whole nother can of worms that I really don't want to get into today. But the Flames also haven't bought out a player in a very long time. And it's not looking like that's going to be something that happens under Conroy either, unless it is some sort of, again, obscure situation. The way that I look at it is if the Flames did not buy out Milan Lucic, they are not buying out anyone in this current generation. I think in total, the Flames have bought out 3 or 4 players in their entire, 40 years of existence. So I'm not necessarily banking on a Huberdeau or Sharangovich buyout. It just does not seem like something the Flames would ever even consider. Plus, you're not really saving money or doing like, it's buyouts now are very different from where they were even like 5 or 6 years ago. Like when the Wild bought out 2 of their players the same summer, and they had all that dead cap space. It's not like that. I think truly it's not about saving money. I think it's literally about just opening up a roster spot for a better player. And I don't see the Flames doing that, especially under Conroy. A more aggressive general manager, maybe. But with Pospisil, you have one more year on his current contract, and then that brings him to free agency. He will be a restricted free agent with arbitration rights at the end of this upcoming season. He has a very tough agent. Dan Milstein is his agent, and I think that for those of you who maybe don't know, he is also Zadorov's agent that just kind of put everything on blast about him wanting to be traded. He's also Matt Coronado's agent, who was on Twitter. I believe he's Matt Coronado's agent, who was on Twitter tweeting all about Coronado being sent down. I lied. Coronado has a very different agent. But regardless, I do not see a world where the Flames are signing Martin Pospisil to a long-term deal after he only had 25 points in 81 games. I think that at best, Pospisil is a bottom 6 player. I think everyone just kind of has to shift their expectations, as well as I don't know. I don't necessarily think that Martin Pospisil is one of the players that the Flames will be keeping around for a long time once he hits the open market. Or maybe they even trade him since they have control of his rights. I mean, sure, why not? But I do think the only way that we are clearing this logjam is if we start trading players. And I know people don't want to hear that. I know that people are very I don't want to say sensitive because that sounds mean, but they're not advocating for players to be traded to get this team to the next level. Where I have come to the point where, you have to at some point make some tough decisions, and you're going to hurt some feelings along the way, and kind of, so be it. One way or another, the Flames are going to find themselves back in the playoffs, and hopefully next time it is a little bit more of a serious run. But coming up next, we're going to talk about the feasible options. Is this something that could actually happen? Thanks, everyone, for hanging out with me today on Locked On Flames. Make sure you're following the show wherever you get your podcasts, as well as YouTube. And you're following me on Twitter and Blue Sky at Jess Belmosto. I talked about it a few minutes ago, but it's... you have to clear this logjam one way or another. And I don't think you're waiting 6 years for Huberdeau's contract to be off the books. Don't think you're waiting 5 for Farabee or Sharangovich. And Pospisil, I think, is an interesting situation where you could trade him. Oh, and I do think that you could trade Sharangovich as well. Joel Farabee, I don't want to write off his experience as a Flame so far because we haven't gotten to see a truly settled Joel Farabee as a Flame. So I will give him the graces of that. But there is so much talent in the Flames lineup. Like, if you look on paper, you see names. You see Zary. You see Kadri. You see Huberdeau. You see Coronado. Coleman. Backlund. Like, there are very talented players on this team that can make a difference. And it's impossible to keep all of them. And I think that's where a lot of people kind of obviously, like, being a fan, you don't want a player to leave unless they are, you know, not good for the room or, just very useless. And I think the other thing you have to remember in this situation as well is while you're clearing room for your next generation of Flames, not everyone is going to be an NHLer. You aren't guaranteed an NHL career just because you're drafted and you sign, whatever. That does not mean anything. If your talent does not translate on the ice from one developmental process to the next, you're not going to have a career. And I'm not saying you write someone off after 36 AHL games and some time in the show. Like, no, that's not, to me, that's not how it works. I think you have to give someone ample opportunity. I think of Matt Coronado as an example here because he did have a very tough go of it. His first shot at the NHL. He had like 3 goals in 36 games. Not going to do you any good. But with some extra time and with the Wranglers and starting the season with the Flames and getting sent back down and then getting recalled, that extra time and motivation really pushed him and earned him a significant raise and a long-term extension with the Flames this summer. But then on the other side of things, you have Martin Pospisil, who came in hot. He came in super hot. And you're like, oh, okay, like this kid was just projected to be like a middle six player. Maybe he's, a little bit more than that. And that spark has fizzled. And he was never really able to find it again this season. I think you have to be very careful with a player like Pospisil. Because while he has cleaned up his game, he still has that level of physicality that can get carried away. So you got to kind of reserve that a little bit. And then you also look at his medical history too, right? 5 concussions. He was ready to hang up the skates and said, you know what? Let me give it another shot, and makes it pro. While that story is amazing, if you can't play at the NHL level and hang with your teammates, it is a detriment. And at that point, your team should be looking to trade you. And I'm not saying they need to trade Martin Pospisil right now, but it is something that they could potentially explore if needed. They have to make way for these players. If they want to figure out if Sam Honzek is an NHL player, I think this summer, he'll put in his work training. Hopefully he won't get hurt. And we'll start seeing the test. Again, how Conroy and the team determine these things is very different. They have the hands-on experience. I am talking to a computer. So, these are just my opinions. You can't just write someone off immediately, but you can't just let them kind of circle the drain for seasons and seasons. That is unfair to everyone involved. But the only way this team is clearing the logjams is if they make some trades. Because there's just no way they're going to be able to keep everyone and continue to get better. Backlund likely to retire at the end of this upcoming season. I just say that because he's older and the contract is up. I don't know that for certain. You don't really have any forwards on expiring contracts except like Kevin Rooney and Ryan Lomberg next season. So you're going to have to either wait, see how everyone else is progressing, or what the market looks like in order for this to happen. So we will keep an eye on things and figure out just what can happen here. But until then, make sure you're subscribed to Locked On Flames wherever you get your podcasts, as well as YouTube. We're here for you Monday through Friday, 5 days a week, your team every day. And if you missed thought you missed Friday's episode, you didn't. There was just a power outage, and I couldn't do anything. I was mid-recording. So I apologize. But we'll be here for you every day this week. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you get your podcasts, as well as YouTube, and I will see you all later. Bye-bye.